Welcome back to Basic Bananas Radio, where we share tried and tested ways to grow your brand and get more customers. Everything from the latest in marketing and branding, right through to growing your team and creating an irresistible culture.
Hi, and welcome back to Basic Bananas Radio. I just had a really awesome and insightful conversation with my dear friend Kim on the post-exit journey, which can be a very emotional and challenging time. And Kim is so great at exploring this transition, and she is sharing some really valuable insights in this episode. So enjoy, and let's jump straight in. Hey Kim, welcome to today's show. I am so happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much. I'm really stoked to be here.
And you are calling in from Cape Town. It is 5 a.m. for you. I don't know how you look this fresh and awake at that hour. I look usually a bit more, Betty.
But I'm definitely a morning person for sure.
Yeah, well, so am I, but definitely at 5 a.m. That's a great time to wake up and talk. And today, what we're going to do, and the reason I'm so excited about having you on this show is because we're going to talk about some of the research you're currently doing on exits and post-exit entrepreneurs. You also exited a business. You are just an incredibly interesting, brilliant human. I've met you a few years ago through Entrepreneurs Organization, and you are a very, driven person, and you also have very strong social values, and you also have this sense of adventure. You're very adventurous, and I think you also give that gift to your daughters. Was your daughter won some skiing medal recently? Yeah.
Yeah, she did. She won the under 12s backcountry freestyle skiing competition in Chile, which is basically just backcountry skiing and kids jumping off cliffs and having fun. So
Well,
I was incredibly proud of her little spirit, and she did so well.
Well, and I'm sure she competed against people that actually live in the snow and that have snowy mountains, right? Not in Cape Town, where there's not too much skiing around there. So that's just such an incredible achievement. And the other thing, and we might come back to that also today and have some analogies with that, is you're also in the process of getting your pilot's license, and you love flying. When you talked about it just before, I could tell you're just obsessed with flying, which is so, nice to see. And there are so many parallels when it comes to flying and running a business and even exiting a business. So talking about exits, what in your research, I know right now you're doing a lot of research and you're a researcher in that field. What have you learned? So what are some of the key learnings that you would like to share?
So when I exited my own business almost 3 years ago now, I had made a decision to sell. I had made a decision to leave the business, and I went about finding a suitable, buyer. In fact, found a few. The business process, the process of selling the business wasn't too painful, and in the end, there was this money moment, and everything was exciting, and then a few months later, I woke up one morning and I just felt miserable. And I thought, come on, who are you? Most people, I've aspired to exit for ages. This is what I've been working towards. How can you be sort of lying here feeling actually quite lost? I felt completely rudderless and lost. And what I've identified is that there are hundreds and thousands of entrepreneurs who've exited or sold their businesses, and there isn't a lot of research on what happens afterwards, emotionally, mentally. And so through my research, I'm really digging deeper into that phase of life. So what happens to a 32-year-old entrepreneur who sells their business or exits? What happens to a 59-year-old entrepreneur from Holland who exits their business, or someone from the Middle East or the US or Africa or South Africa? And so what I have found is that it is not always sunshine and roses, and that there is quite a lot of our identity that is tied up in this notion of being entrepreneurial or being an entrepreneur. So the phases, the emotional stages and the roller coaster that happens post-exit, I'm still uncovering like that, the trends or the similarities, but there are a few things that have really surprised me.
Yeah, and I would love to hear what those things are that surprised you. Is there such a thing as, is there a term that is, we say, post-exit blues? It sounds like it is a post-exit blues. Maybe you can coin that even, or is that a thing? And also, when you look at these different exits from any type of person, anywhere in the world, any age, is it similar? Is it a similar feeling? I know quite a few people who have exited, and they definitely had a bit of a post-exit blues, sometimes shorter periods, sometimes really long periods.
Yeah, 100%. So there are many different types of exits. There are many different, periods. There are many different, for example, you could have a clean exit. You might have an earnout. There might be sort of a period where there's a work exchange. And so the duration of the exit is often like really different. I've identified so far, let's say, at least two different like types of entrepreneurs. And the one starts building like a week after they've exited. So the money's in the bank, and a week later, they're already like hiring their next team, onto the next thing. Like they are just builders. And perhaps this, maybe this wasn't their first exit. And so they're on the like they know the bus. They're on the roller coaster and they're like, this is not my first rodeo. I've exited now. I've got my next big thing coming. And then you've got others who perhaps had been working for 10, 15, 20 years in one business, built it up to a really like sort of sizable business, and then exited. And in those cases, it often depends on age factors, for example, or phases of life, for example, like do they have a young family or whatnot. But almost every single entrepreneur I have interviewed so far had a period of that post-exit blues, and I love that phrase that you've just coined. But in inexplicable, like really inexplicable things, like for example, loss of confidence and a sense of imposter syndrome, which is very unusual for someone who has done this incredible thing, right? You've like worked hard, the business has done well, there's some sort of value that someone has been prepared to pay, a premium for, and yet there's this feeling or the shadow of like, I'm not good enough. There's this imposter syndrome. The second thing that I've observed is fear of money, like fear of running out of money, which is really strange because at this time, in most cases, there's been this like lump sum of payment that that has happened, this transaction that's happened, and yet there's this fear of like, I'm going to run out of money, and it's not rational. It's not a rational related to actual fact. It's just this like fear. So some entrepreneurs go deep into financial management. Some express it in different ways. The third and sort of obvious one is starting to reflect on community and like what my role is in my community. How can I help beyond business? So I've made an impact business wise. How can I start thinking about life beyond the business? And so often joining a nonprofit board, joining working on a community endeavor that uplifts sometimes just their direct community or the country, etc. So those are some of the little nuggets that I've taken away. But I think most surprising so far has been that this loss of identity, this feeling of being rudderless, really transcends countries. It happens to the very, very best entrepreneurs who I would suspect from the outside were just like always amazing and always perfect, never doubted themselves. So that was
Yeah.
a big eye opener for me.
Really, really interesting and really surprising insights. And I've definitely seen the you know fear of running out of money with people that had huge exits that definitely have more than they could ever spend in a lifetime. And I think when talking to some of them, it's almost because there's not a regular income per se. And obviously, investing is risky, but at that level, really, you could lose 50% and you'd still be okay. And then the other thing that I have also noticed with some is because now, especially with families, now that they are, because before they were at work so much, now they're seeing the family a lot more, and there's almost like conflict there. It's almost like, oh, now we're seeing each other too much. It's almost like they don't feel connected or almost not desired to be at home. It's almost like, well, what are you doing at home? You used to be away all day, every day. So you said for you, one of the major ones of those was the feeling rudderless. Was there any of
Mhm.
the other ones that you felt, and how did you overcome some of these challenges?
Yeah. So interesting to double click on what you said now on family time. What I've observed is that in many cases, after the exit, there's a time of travel. And it's usually if there is a family or a spouse, like it will be, I've observed that it's almost always together. And so this time of like exploring the world, um, that has happened consistently as along with like homemaking. So, or I've had this exit, we're going to do that renovation that we've always talked about, or we're going to build the pool, or whatever it is that like that renovation project that we never had time for and maybe not quite enough money. So those are the two things that I've observed, which I think speaks to reconnecting with family and reconnecting with our identity as parents, as partners, as individuals, and no longer just as entrepreneurs. So, in most circles, people would know me as an entrepreneur. So, when I had no business, it's like, oh, Kim, what do you do? I'm like, oh, I'm a mom, I'm a part, but what are you doing? I'm like, I'm not really doing anything. I'm gardening quite a lot. I'm, on the mountain with the dogs. Like I'm not I wouldn't identify as a like stay-at-home parent, but I'm not doing anything right now. And this act of just being and not doing all the time and being a human being, um, I think that is what I spent a great deal of time doing, is just like getting back to who am I without my business? Who am I, even in a way without things like EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, is a big part of my life. And I love the community, I love engaging. But who am I when I'm not an entrepreneur? And so that's part of the healing for me. Travel. With the family, we took a sabbatical for 3 months in Canada and took the kids skiing and just lived out in like, home exchange little huts in the middle of nowhere. And a lot of entrepreneurs I've seen have done the same, like taking some time away from the status quo, removing themselves, like exploring the world, seeing different cultures. Yeah. And there, I actually did my master's thesis on transformative travel and what happens to individuals when we travel and how we can step into ourselves when we're away from home.
Yeah, and definitely, that's the time when I feel the most connected to myself too, when I'm on the road, which is funny. Obviously, my identity is almost wrapped up in traveling then, and that's my question too, is how I wonder, because I definitely feel like my identity is super wrapped up also in my, you know, in my view of me being an entrepreneur, because I've been doing it for
Mhm.
so long. So I wonder, because if I had an exit right now, I probably would build the next thing straight away. So I wonder how we can not get so, and this is maybe the $1 million question or the multi-million-dollar question. How can we not get so wrapped up in this identity as an entrepreneur? I don't know if you
100%.
got any insight.
100%. And I think that is the question that I am asking. That is at the nub of almost every interview with post-exit entrepreneurs, is like, what makes us more human? And there are some who are like so joyful right now. They've transcended this like identity as an entrepreneur. And so there is, there's some magic there that I haven't gotten to the bottom of quite yet. But it is, we get so tied up in how the world perceives us and, the meaning that we create in the world and our version of success. And when there's an opportunity to reframe, which I think there rarely is before, when life is busy and you're building and scaling and hiring and looking after other people's well-being, there isn't time to sometimes reflect and be like, what am I, what am I beyond this? But the invitation, I believe, is to spend time questioning the different facets of life, because we are so much more than only entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and maybe it comes back to what he said earlier. It's about the being in the human, that the human being, it's just being. So and we have all these labels like, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a mom, I'm a daughter, I'm a surfer, I'm an adventurer, I'm a motorcycle rider. But in the end, maybe I'm just, if I'm going to go really philosophical, maybe I'm just love, maybe I'm just, I don't know what all these words are, but maybe we also can be conscious about these labels that we
Yeah,
attach to. Because if one gets taken away, if I can't surf, and that happens sometimes here when I can't surf because it's been so bad, then I feel weird because now part of my identity got taken away. Or if I go to Switzerland for too long, my home country, and I don't surf for a month, I feel weird. And I don't know
yeah,
if it's just because I miss it or because it's part of my identity got chipped away for that time. Just
100%. 100%. And in a way, people go through similar transitions when they lose a parent, and suddenly they don't feel, that identity as a child shifts, and maybe they become the head of the family, and like, life is full of changes, obviously, but what you say about the way that we identify and chipping away at that, maybe to the core or our essence,
yeah.
is a really interesting question.
Yeah, I think a worthwhile one. I'd love to shift gears and talk a little bit pre-exit, and also just see if you can share some thoughts on what did the last sort of 2 years look like? So when did you know that you wanted an exit, like 2 or so years before you actually exited, or was it faster than that in your business?
So, I had the fortunate and unfortunate um, privilege of having a tourism business. So, for 8 years that I ran that particular business, it had evolved. I was doing this for about 17 years. So started when I was 20, actually a bit less. I started when I was 23, and this little backpackers hostel that I started from my love of travel evolved into a much bigger business, into a hotel slash backpackers. And it was growing brilliantly. We had two different locations. We were planning a third. We were speaking to property owners all over the world. And I ran a nonprofit concurrently, which was around empowering young women to join the tourism industry. And it was all about transformational learning. So everything's going great. And then, that age-old story of, and then COVID came. Ba,
Yeah.
ba, ba.
Yep.
COVID actually was a massive gift for me because I had COVID. I'd contracted it really early. I was, I think, number 42 in South Africa.
Wow.
So I had the privilege of time away from the business, away from the mania because I was isolating. And we jumped on an EO call to Italy, and one of the entrepreneurs there said, it's crazy here, people are dying. The healthcare workers are completely exhausted. And someone said, what would you have done 2 weeks ago? And he said, 2 weeks ago, I would not have closed the hotels because they're literally sleeping in the cars. It's a nightmare. Like they're not resting properly. They're going to burn out. At that stage, I had about 300 beds. And I was like, oh, maybe I could help here. That idea evolved, and a week later, I was kind of mopping my floor, listening to Alanis Morissette and doing the whole COVID thing. And I had an idea, called a friend of mine who's an incredible marketer in South Africa, Ross, and I said, hey, can you build me a platform in 48 hours? I've got a radio interview on Monday morning. It's going to be called Ubuntu Beds. And we're going to basically create a platform like Airbnb, but for healthcare workers in empty hotels, apartments, Airbnbs. And long story short, him and his incredible team built a brand, like built a website, and by Monday morning it was done. And this was like the first week of COVID. And Ubuntu Beds just took off. We accommodated 4,000 healthcare workers within a year. And in that time, I was able to reposition and reframe myself. And it was fast paced. It was bringing together people from all walks of life. The hotels were winning. The benefactors were winning. The healthcare workers were winning, and it was just such a fun project that had real impact. And so in that moment, I became a little bit. I realized that my purpose has shifted, and the hotel, the hostel game has always been my heart, but I had evolved, and so it was time for me to move on. And this is going to sound very esoteric, but I think the beginning of selling the business was just me making the decision in my mind and almost like opening my heart. Within a month, we had 3 offers, and we didn't even go to market. I didn't tell anyone, like, I want to sell my business. It was just an intention setting, like, I think I'm ready to move on. And you said, how long did I prepare? We had actually been through an accelerator about 2 or 3 years prior, where one of the main things that they did was teach us about a data room. So this is what a data room looks like. And some businesses have them from day one. The next business that I am starting is having a data room from day one. And the data room is like all the technical stuff that people ask you for when they come knocking on your door. Oh, we're interested in buying your business. We need these documents. And so when the first person came knocking, I said, no problem, here's our data room. It's ready. Normally that would take someone 2 weeks to get ready. Meeting minutes and this document and that document. Ours was done. And so I had the upper hand, so to say. Well, I felt extremely confident going into negotiations. And so it was relatively quick. It was a 6-month process. Yeah.
And what are some of the elements of a data room, as you call it? Data room. I've actually haven't heard that expression in this way.
Yeah. So it's everything in one place. I would start off with the basics like your company documents, your founding documents, all the registration, all the tax information. So generally, a buyer would want to know, is it a legitimate business? Is it registered correctly? Have you paid your taxes? Like, not that there's a massive tax bill that's going to come in 3 years' time, or that there's been, some sort of naughty business. So it's first of all like the legislative, the governance, the financial information. And then it could be everything down to how often are there leadership meetings? How often are there board meetings? Are there any external, is there any external capacity or people that come in? It's, obviously things like financial statements, financial year ends, balance sheets, income statement, all the financial aspects for the last few years. So it's a kind of, it builds up so that they can measure the trend of the business as well. Yeah, it's a pretty boring function, but it's incredibly useful having it in a space. So ours had it was like a Google sheet, and it had literally like the name of the document, click here, the name of the document, click here, and it was grouped from most important to kind of like marketing collateral from 2013.
And you literally just had like a Google Drive with all the documents sitting in there. And then you had a Google Sheet with a summary of, hey, here are the documents. And then it took them to your Google Drive where that was your data room.
Yeah, exactly. And we were very aware we would never share client lists or something because one of our competitors actually did try to send in an undercover buyer so that they could access everything. But there was nothing there. We wouldn't give them like our absolute IP or contacts that are essential, because I mean that would just be that's what the person who's buying the business gets. Yeah.
Yeah, love it. And one critical thing you said, because when talking to people that are preparing for an exit, it's always about also having a really good leadership team in place. And you mentioned that too. You said make sure how often does the leadership team meet? So you implied that there is a leadership team. You already had a great leadership team, I assume, in place that can run the business without you.
Yes. Yes and no. I mean, the world post-COVID looked very different for hotel businesses. So like many, we had to downscale a lot. But the setup was clear. So the leadership team, my leadership team was extraordinary, and we still talk very often. So I think having a strong team on board and also having them aligned with what the plan is and how they will personally benefit if there is an exit, because it can be scary if you're working as a team and then the founder's like, okay, people, I'm out of here. Good luck. But I think reassuring and sort of giving everyone the upside of what life will look like when there is an exit and how that makes their lives better is also important.
Yeah, that's such a big point. So communicate along the journey and bring them with you so they know that there's a future either way, and an up, what's it called?
Yeah.
An uptake for them, an up.
On upside, yeah.
An upside for them. Yeah, exactly. Are there any final tips or anything that you would like to share that I haven't asked you, maybe on this topic or on your research?
An invitation. If you know someone who has exited a business, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I would absolutely love to interview them. And I think then, I think a parting thought would be to take the opportunity to reflect on who we are as human beings and not as human doings, and really take a moment to redefine who we are without the business and without the labels, as you mentioned, the mom, the surfer, the skier, or the adventurer, and really get to know our essence, because I think that when the time comes, doing that work now can be incredibly rewarding.
I love that. And the time always comes because change is inevitable, whether it's a closure of a business or an exit or any type of change. I'm going to do some pondering on that topic too. Now, for anyone who wants to reach out to you, I know you're also an incredible business strategist and coach. The best way is for them to connect via LinkedIn.
Yep. LinkedIn, Kim Whitaker, or I think my handle is Bravely Kim. So please do connect.
Great. We'll pop the link into the show notes too for the LinkedIn profile for Kim. And if you want to connect there, that would be amazing. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Kim, for joining us this early in the morning and for sharing your wisdom with such an open heart. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
To get more from Basic Bananas and to learn new ways to grow your business with clever marketing, visit basicbananas.com.